Right, I think I've got everything together, so I'll ask people to put the questions as they go along. We'll have a question section at the end as well, and we'll see. I don't know how the timing's going to go. It may last an hour, it may last 15 minutes. I've got no idea. If we do finish early, is there a contingency, or do we just say?
There's no pressure if your conversation actually comes to a close early. My feeling is that there's probably going to be enough questions to keep going all afternoon. So I don't think time will be a
yeah. Keeving's one of those areas that it's a bit mystical, isn't it? And people will want to know how it works.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Right, give it another minute or so. Right. I'll start at 2 o'clock on the dot, I think. I think that is pretty much 2 o'clock. Right, I think we'll make a start. My name's Dave Matthews of the Bartestree Cider Company. And today I'm going to interview my good friends Adam and Anne Bland, who make their Templar Cider in Normandy, near the small town of Vermoutier. Before we start, just want to say a few bit of housekeeping things. Do ask questions on the question and answer section to the right of your screen, and we'll maybe answer them as we go along. But also at the end, we'll take time to ask to leave time to people to ask questions if they want to at the end as well. Also like to mention that the sponsors in the sponsor area of Hop-In are well worth talking to. Some very interesting people with a lot of cider knowledge. So do go and talk to the sponsors and learn from them, please. Okay, so I first got to know the Blands when I edited Cameron's Good Cider Guide in 2000. And they wrote me a letter, which I've still got, saying, please can we be in the following edition, if you wouldn't mind, as we are English, living in Normandy. And I kind of kept them in mind. And then when, as part of the Welsh Perry and Cider Society, we organised the International Craft Cider Festival at Calvados in Nelson, in South Wales in 2011, they represented France. It's one of the Six Nations at that particular event. It was an event ahead of its time. So far ahead of its time that it lost a substantial amount of money. And didn't happen again, sadly. But then the Welsh Perry and Cider Society moved their national festival and championships to Calvados Castle. And they thought, well, we quite enjoyed the international theme. Let's invite some international cider makers. So Fiona and I came along representing England, and the Blands came representing France from 2014 to 2016. And it was a really good event. I mean, we had a stall next to the Blands, Fiona and I, and Fiona's just to my left here at the moment. And we were quite busy. We had a queue, maybe at times three or four people deep. Yeah, we were quite pleased with that. The Blands queue went right the length of the marquee, out the door of the marquee, into the middle of the castle courtyard. It sounds like a cliche, but in this case, it's genuinely true. People were joining the queue for their stall, not knowing what was at the front, and reasoning that it's such a long queue, it must be good when they get to the front. And indeed it was. When they got to the front of the Blands queue, they discovered that the Blands cider is absolutely fantastic. I'm a massive fan. By the way, they got us banned from that event because they took so much money. All the Welsh cider makers objected quite reasonably, and we were all thrown out. But they genuinely inspired Fiona and I to have a stab at making a Keeved cider, which is really what this talk is all about. And luckily, Adam and Anne have been incredibly generous with their time and their advice, and they've mentored us on our journey to make a sort of a half decent product. Even to the point of taking us to their local agricultural merchants where I could buy the corks and cages, and they advised me on which corking machine to buy, and I ignored their advice and have regretted it ever since. So, so this is what this talk is really about: Adam and Anne, their business, but in particular how they make their cider in this process of keeving. Hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll all know a lot more about keeving and feel that maybe you could have a stab at it. But if you do, please don't just randomly fill a bottle full of sweet cider. You can make a bomb. You could blind someone if it blows up. You've got to do it properly. So do go and stay in Adam and Anne's bed and breakfast and learn from them. Do come down to Bartestree and hang out with Fiona and I, camp in our garden, have a night with us and a few ciders, and we'll tell you everything we know. No secrets. That's what craft cider is all about, sharing our ideas and knowledge. So I think we should open the first bottle, and then when we're drinking it, Adam and Anne will take us through their history, what brought them to Normandy, and then when they've done that, what we'll do is we'll sort of dissect the aromas and flavours of the cider. So let's crack on with that. And most of you have got the medium cider, but some of you got the late harvest, which is sweeter. Adam and Anne didn't have quite enough bottles of one type to go around, but they're both, as you'll see, both lovely. So let's open this. Adam and Anne, do you want to tell us a bit about the cider to begin with?
Yeah. Well,
perhaps we should start with your history. Let's come to cider in a minute. Sorry, I got the wrong order there. How did you come into cider in the first place? How did it start in England and so on?
right. Well, I got involved in cider when I was 12 years old, back in the 70s, when my father, when he started making cider. And I used to go down, help him on a Saturday morning to earn a bit of pocket money, washing 45-gallon wooden barrels. And
Oh, wow.
I used to get the sack quite often because I was usually late. Fortunately, he'd usually take me on the next week's. So I carried on like that, and I did go to school as well, as my wife hastened to point out, but had a fairly undistinguished career at school. But I ended up at technical college doing photography, film studies, communication studies, and English. And but I still carried on with cider. Quite often I was either late or absent from lectures because I was delivering cider or something related to cider. In fact, that's where Anne and I met, at Hilton Technical College.
Okay.
And one occasion I took Anne with me to deliver some cider to Reading. And we used to have this dreadful old Ford Transit van with sliding doors. And it was a very hot day. Anyway, we delivered the cider successfully, and we're coming back through Reading in the rush hour. And I had the door open because it was very hot. And anyway, there was a hell of a traffic jam. I think I braked hard, and the door fell off. So I had to go back in the middle of this rush hour with all these people watching me, pick up my door, put it back up on the van. And this is, to impress my girlfriend. It was half of the cost. Yeah. Anyway, for some strange reason, it didn't put her off, and we got married shortly afterwards and been married for 40 years. But, anyway, that's by the by. Yeah. I eventually left college with A-levels in photography and so on, and felt myself fully qualified to be a cider maker. And so I joined my father full-time with the cider. And we were lucky at the time, this was the real ale revolution. So real cider kind of went on the back of real ale. It was they went well together. And so we made more and more cider each year, farmhouse cider, draft cider. And it was really going very well. And then eventually we, this is a picture on the screen is our premises at Oldbury-on-Severn, where my father, his first year, he made 1,500 gallons. Second year, he made 3,000 gallons. And the last year we were at these premises, we made 500,000 gallons for showerings and 120,000 gallons for ourselves.
Wow.
Then we had to sell it.
Yeah.
But, what we did basically, we were looking for have this cider bottled, and a bottling company which was owned by Hazelwood Foods was bottling it for us.
Yeah.
And they were supplying supermarkets with own label cider.
Right.
So eventually they took us over because we just couldn't cope with the demand. We started out with 5,000 gallons a month and ended up with 10,000 gallons a week, and we just couldn't cope.
Goodness me.
The premises in Oldbury. So they made, sorry.
What happened to the brand then? What happened to the premises?
Well, they just went. They were abandoned. Quite honestly, we moved to new premises in Frampton-on-Severn, which was an old Cadbury's factory.
All right.
Lovely place, and we spent loads and loads of Hazelwood's money, which was really great. And we made the first year we were there, we made 2 million gallons of cider.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was good cider, but unfortunately, to supply the supermarkets, they didn't want good cider. Well, they wanted the best cider you could give them, but you couldn't give them pure juice cider at the price they wanted to pay. So we carried on. We did some big supermarkets. We did one particular one, which was unfortunately was my recipe. It was a sweet cider for one supermarket, and it was 40% apple, and the rest of it was some awful stuff we used to put in, including Chinese tannins and saccharine, the colouring. Anyway, it sold 600,000 gallons a year. But really, over time, Anne and I just thought this was terrible, chemical product we were producing. We really wanted to go back to, making real cider again, but making it from our own apples that we grew on ourselves. So we looked around for a farm in Gloucester where we lived at the time. We couldn't find anything that was really suitable. And my mother-in-law, oddly enough, said, "Why don't you go to look in France?" And I thought, well, I knew you weren't that keen on me.
Yeah, that's right. I'm definitely trying to get rid of you.
Anyway, she was quite right. We eventually found this farm, which oddly enough had been abandoned for 15 years before we bought it. And we replanted the orchards. We did camping, bed and breakfast, and sheep. And now the trees we planted are mature, and we're producing Keeving cider. When we moved to Normandy, I knew nothing about Keeving cider. I've been making cider 18 years. I've never seen a chapeau at all.
All right. Yeah.
So I went on a cider making course to learn how to make cider after 18 years of wasteful stuff.
Yes.
Fortunately, the French are very good at these courses. They do various different courses and all sorts of different things, and they're very, very good, I must say. And obviously, I was fascinated by the subject because I couldn't understand how the French could make a natural, unpasteurized, unfiltered, sweet cider that was stable. And of course, the answer was Keeving.
Yes. Before we go any further, Adam, but just look at the chat here, and I think the late harvest has got a bit shaken up in the post. So I think you need to open it in a wet room or outdoors or something. If just be careful when you open the late harvest. But the medium opened beautifully, and it's a beautiful cider. Right, do carry on. Sorry.
Right, sorry. Yeah. So where were we talking to now?
Oh, the French cider making courses and how good they are at that.
Oh yes. So then we replanted the orchards, which we were advised by the local seeder really on the varieties, because obviously in France they have different names to the UK.
Yeah.
Although some of them are the same variety. I mean, we have one here called Biscay, which in the UK is called Michelin. So I'm sure a lot of them are the same apples in the UK, but we didn't know. So we basically followed the seedery's advice, and on pollination as well. And it's worked out well. I mean, the only thing I would say, if anybody's thinking planting an orchard, is to, if you have animals, do it in such a way that you have one orchard with early apples, one orchard with medium crop apples, and then one orchard with late.
Yes.
Because ours are all mixed up, and it means that obviously the sheep don't understand that, you haven't finished. They want to go in there and eat the lot. So.
Yes.
So that's something, if anybody's planting an orchard, do consider that. I regret not doing that.
I would never think of that. Yeah. It's...
No. But apart from that, they've grown very well. The soil here is ideal. It's about a spade stacked with good soil, and then we have flint and limestone underneath, which gives the trees their minerals.
Yeah.
Good drainage, basically. Normally we get plenty of rain. Because of the stones, it drains away, so the roots aren't drowning.
Now, just the photograph you got there of Mowbray on 7, you got a travelator taking the apples up. It looks like they're coming from an underground
Yes.
apple mine or something, like you're mining apples.
Well, yes, we used to have, you can't see it, but in the opposite direction to that, we had this very large concrete hopper.
Right.
And we used to have these lorries, they back up to this hopper, and they jack the lorry right up, then open the tailgate, and 25 tons of apples would spill out into this hopper.
Oh, wow.
And we'd pump water from underneath that elevator, there's a pit. So we pump water from the pit with a flight pump, 20,000 gallons an hour, up to this hopper where the apples were.
Wow.
That would wash them through a tunnel to this elevator. Elevator. On the other end of that elevator, there's yet another big compound, which held about 10 tons of them. And after that was at that time, I think it must have been bed presses. We started off, we got bed presses from the old Coat Cider factory. But eventually it was my father actually, he decided that it was too labour intensive. Because I mentioned earlier on we did the showerings contract. Basically showering had the same problem as most cider makers. One year there were too many apples and the next year there weren't enough.
Yeah, sure.
And they found that in the years with a lot of apples, they couldn't actually physically press enough to press all the apples.
Yeah.
So they asked my father if he'd be interested in pressing juice for them, making juice for them. And so the first year he did. He took on 8 people to do the pressing, and they did. I think they did 5,000 gallons a day of juice.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. Then the following year, no, it wasn't. It was 2 years later. That's right. In the next bumper, my father decided this was just too difficult with these bed presses and 8 people. He was looking for an automatic press, and he bought a belt press. We all thought he was completely bonkers because this bed press was 17,000 quid, which was a hell of a lot of money.
Yes.
Anyway, so he bought this press anyway, despite what everybody else said. And of course, he was absolutely right, because with this one press, just my father and I made 500,000 gallons of juice for showering, just the 2 of us.
Wow.
Although the yield was much lower, and the belt press gave a lower yield.
Yeah.
We didn't really care when the apples were so plentiful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Smashing. Shall we dissect this lovely cider?
Yeah. Well,
I've got the medium in my hands, so if you can sort of talk us through it, perhaps we can do it together, but perhaps highlight any differences people might expect to see with the late harvest, if they've got any left, of course, after it's overflowed out the top a little bit. So, talk us through the flavours and the aromas, Adam.
Well, for it. See, it's quite lively. Because it's naturally sparkling, you should notice the bubbles are very fine.
Yes.
And they keep on bubbling for an awful long time, much longer than the artificially carbonated cider will do.
So, but naturally sparkling means there's a yeast sediment in the bottle.
Yes,
And fermentation, secondary fermentations occurred in the bottle to give a natural carbonation, as opposed to force carbonating it with, let's say, a CO2 cylinder or something like that.
Yeah, which means you need to pour it carefully, because if you pour it carefully, you can get the entire bottle out without having a cloudy glass of cider. And the cider is nice and clear; it hasn't been filtered, and the colour is obviously natural. We don't use any colour.
Yeah, it's a very soft aroma and soft flavour, sort of soft and natural.
Yeah.
There's no harshness to it. There's no. I'm very sensitive to the tang you get when you pasteurize a cider, which I really don't like.
No.
And so that sort of directs, I think, both of us with our cider making. You make a more natural product with more fruit flavour coming through. And that's the key here, I think. You've got beautiful fruit flavours. But in a tremendous balance. Why is it so balanced?
Well, I blend the apples. Basically, I use 80% bittersweet apples and 20% acid apples.
Okay.
Well, for me, that's a nice balance of acidity.
Now, just the sort of balance in the UK, traditionally we would use about a third sharps, 33%. Why is it lower in Normandy? Is it to do with the enzymes?
Well, yes, partly, but no. Originally, it was French ciders tend to have less acid, basically.
Okay, just as the natural taste.
So yeah, I mean, mine is more acid than most French ciders. So it's sort of compromise, really. But
Yes,
that's why I blend the apples, actually, as you say, with the acidity, because as you say, acid apples, sharp apples, tend to keep less well than cider apples. And,
yeah. So when I was going around Normandy 20 years ago, they were quoting the cider makers. Then were quoting like 10% sharps. So you've got a heritage of 33% sharps, being English. So you're kind of going halfway between the two in a way, aren't you?
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which is, I think, it's a smashing cider. It works really well.
Yeah, I mean the carbonation does make it slightly sharper. Carbonic acid.
Yeah, sure.
Does give you a bit of a sharpness.
So what is it all bittersweets and sharps, or is there any sweets in it?
No, just here on the farm we just have bittersweet and sharp.
Do you want to run off the names so we can enjoy the sound of the varieties for us?
Yeah, well, the medium typically has Binet Rouge, Saint Martin, and then the acid apples would tend to be. We have 4 different varieties here. We have one called Rambo.
Rambo.
Not Rambo like in the films. And we have another one called Peau de Vache, which is apple cow skin. And then we have Petit Jaune and Randy Martin. Really Martin. Sort of cone-shaped apple. And also my brother's name.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then the bittersweet, the other bittersweets, we have Moulin Avant, Boudon. Moulin Avant is one of them, of course. Boudon is it's very low acid actually, but it's very good apple. Obviously, we don't tend to use so much. We might use a little bit of BSK in the medium, but we tend to use most BSK in the dry side.
That's the Michelin.
Yes, Michelin.
Yeah. It gives a kind of an oranginess, doesn't it, to a cider?
Yes. Then the sweet, the people who've got the late harvest sweet cider, the late apples, we have some lovely apples, which with funny names again. One is Solage Agui. Another one is Grand Dan, which means donkey's groin.
Donkey's groin?
Yeah. I don't know the taste of the donkey's groin.
Yeah. Is it the shape, or is it the aroma, the colour?
And Fécamp Rouge, and on the farm we have 22 different varieties.
Brilliant.
But basically the later varieties we tend to use in the late harvest cider for a number of reasons, mainly really because our cider shed is not refrigerated or air conditioned. And so when the late varieties it tends to be nice and cold, and the Chateau tends to be really good rather than.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of your barns with such low temperatures. I'm struggling with my brick buildings with solar roofs that attract the heat. But it is helpful. I've been forgetting to prompt Albert with the slides, but thank you, Albert, for taking us to slide 2. I mean, we'll hold it there for a second. So, anything else to say about the cider, or shall we move on to your business today? Let's do that. So, can you tell us, if people came to your farm, what they would find, what products you have, what's your cider called and why, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, the farm is surrounded by the orchard, and we have 600 standard trees, and I think 2,500 bush trees. But they're all traditional Pays varieties. Now, as you can see from that photo, it's very hilly around here. We're on the south-facing slope, and Normandy, if you haven't been to Normandy, it's a lovely, lovely green countryside.
Yeah, next slide, please, Albert.
Oh, yeah. There's our campsite. which, as you can see, is among the apple trees. There's lovely views over the valley, and it's very popular. We have a lot of English caravans which are stored here, and then we have quite a lot of German, French, and Belgian motorhomes which pop in now and again.
Nice. So people can just come and camp or bring their caravan to your place.
Yes, yes. And then this last year we made a shop in one of the barns.
Ah,
So we sell cider at Calvados from the shop.
you got Perry as well?
Yeah, no, we've got a very large range. It's we've got obviously the dry, naturally sparkling Templars Choice cider, the medium, the late harvest sweet, and the Perry, and then we do a vintage cider. Our Normandy cider, which is very dry. It's much more dry than our ordinary cider. It's almost bone dry, and it's less sparkling deliberately to give a more sort of farmhouse taste.
Yeah. Next slide, please, Albert. So there's you. So what varieties are they?
Good question. I'd say the red ones are probably the men.
Yeah. Those could be peacekeepers.
It could be decent.
Yeah.
That's basically we have an apple picking machine now, which is a Pattern and Grouse, which some of you probably heard of, made in Ledbury, I think, or near Ledbury. And it's a marvellous machine, absolutely marvellous. It picks the apples, takes all the leaves, rubbish out.
Brilliant.
And then I tip the apples into the thing you can see me with my hand on is a bin which holds a ton of apples. So the Pattern and Grouse tips into that bin, and then the tractor brings that bin into the yard. And the apples you can see are in the trailer, which holds 10 tons of apples. And then we just back the press up to that trailer, and we can press 10 tons of apples in the morning.
10 tons of apples in the morning.
So we're very lucky. We have this mobile press which comes round.
Oh,
It really works very well, actually.
oh, nice. Next slide, please, Albert.
Oh, that's me.
That's Anne.
That's pruning. Yes, we got these very good pruning tools. They extend to, I don't know, 4 meters, and they are absolutely superb. They're wolf, I think.
They're really good.
Very good. Yeah, no. So we both prune the trees, take the mistletoe out, and now we shred the prunings now because we can burn them on our wood stove.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
biomass.
Quite kind of ecological.
Yeah.
Do they get made into compressed into little briquettes?
No, we just burn them. I find I put them in a paper bag and put the whole paper bag in the stove. And it burns nice and slowly. You know.
Oh, right. Okay. Very good. So next slide, please, Albert. I think we're going to see. Tell us about this.
We've moved on to the still here. So this is later on in the season. It's usually in June. He comes around with this mobile still, and I supply him with the cider and the wood, and he does the distilling. This is our latest one. We've been through 2 already because they unfortunately have a built-in sort of mortality, which is basically due to the fact that they're standing next to all this alcohol all day. You know,
Well, they drink it, you mean? Or...
you can't blame them for sort of having to taste it now.
Oh, I see. So there's, the guys that run the mobile still have got short life because they're drinking all the colours.
But a happy one, I suppose. But this latest one, he's younger than us, and he doesn't drink too much, so I'm hoping he'll see us out tonight. But this is a column still. There's 2 types of still here in Normandy. There's the column still or the Charente. And we use the column because it's basically more efficient, much quicker. I think it produces just as good Calvados, if not better Calvados than the Charente.
So this goes around the different farms,
Yes.
and you take your turn, and then presumably you get the clear spirit and store it in oak barrels?
Yes. Well, about where I am, behind where I am, the Calvados comes off there at 70% alcohol.
Mm.
and I just take it from there, put it in the oak barrels, and it matures. Different rates and different barrels. You have to kind of know your barrels a little bit.
Yeah.
And I tend to put it in the younger barrels early on, and then move it to older barrels later.
And how long do you store it for in the barrels before you release it?
Well, at the moment, just 5 years. All our Calvados are sold at 5 years at the moment, but we are maturing a 10-year-old one.
Oh wow! And would that be a lot smoother? Do you think?
Well, I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, it's a different taste. It's just some people prefer it's sort of the same with cider really. Some people prefer a younger cider, some people prefer an older cider. It's the same with Calvados. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't say one was necessarily better than the other. It's a question of taste.
Sure. So, if we go to the next slide, please, Albert. We see your bottles and rather nice looking food.
Yeah.
So why the name Templar?
Well, I think I'll hand you over to the boss there because she knows more about it than
Hello. Well, when we came here, there was sort of a few sort of educated local people made mention of the history of the farm, and then some years later, one of our campers on our campsite, he was a caravan store. Anyway, he noticed the big back place on our fire, and he said, "Oh, it's got a Latin motto. I'll get that translated for you," because I think he had an old Latin teacher back in the UK or something. And he found that it was the Knights Templars motto. And so we thought, oh, that's interesting. And then our eldest son, John Paul, typed into Google, I suppose, and he came up with all this history about our farm being a possession of the Knights Templar. It was always a farm. It was never anything else. But it was given to the Knights Templar by a noble widowed lady in the 12th century. And it was part of the commandery of Les Andelys, where Chateau Gaillard is, of Richard I. He was famous with Richard the Lionheart. But she stayed here and the rest of the family moved over there. So I don't know why she gave our farm to the Knights Templar, but she did. And it carried on being a possession of the Knights Templar until they were suppressed. And then, like many Normandy Knights Templar, it immediately joined the sister organisation, the Knights Hospitaliers Saint-Jean. And it carried on being a Knights Templar, or Hospitaliers Saint-Jean property, right up until the 18th century. And there's quite a few archives in the National Archives at Paris about it. So we were trying to think of another name because bland cider, people used to make jokes about it, you know.
Yes.
So we thought, you know, Templars cider, you know, given the history of our farm, would be quite a nice choice, really. So that's where the name Templars comes from.
And what about the logo? What was the inspiration for the logo?
Well, oddly enough, it's this backplate, the sword, the knight's helmet, and then on the back of the label, that's all taken from the big metal backplate in our big fireplace, and our drew it. Yes. Yeah. So,
Nice. Didn't Adam come up with the logo when he was in church?
Yes, he did. Yes.
When he should have been listening to the vicar.
Ask him about that.
I think I'm inspired by him.
Just a quick question on your. Well, talking about your products. Is there anywhere in the UK that we can buy your cider or Calvados?
Yes, well, of course, yes. There's,
Quite a few places.
quite a few places. Well, online, obviously, our own website, Templars Cider. .co.uk,
Yes.
and then there's
Scratchings.
Cider is Wine,
Yes, just started.
Okay.
Very good
and
organisation.
then there's various farm shops have it. Middle Farm, West Suffolk,
Yeah, Lewes.
Darts Farm in Devon.
Oh, yes, right over near Exeter.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, so plenty of places. Good. So people can get it. Probably the best place. Well, one of the best places is going to be going direct to you, isn't it? So perfect. Let's move on to the way you make the cider. So Albert, can we have next slide number 8? I think it is. which shows us, well, you can tell us what they're showing and how does this Keeving thing work? And first, why is it done in France? Why is it such a French technique that's so widespread in France? What's the history there, and then how do you do it?
Right. Well, I think that the reason you do Keeving really is produce a natural cider which is stable and can be sweet. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this was because an awful lot of Normans moved to Paris in the industrial
Yeah, the late 18th, early 19th century.
and they were used to having their cider in Normandy, straight from the barrel. But obviously in Paris, they couldn't do that. So I think that was when they found that by bottling it, they could it would keep, and they could drink the cider in Paris without any problem. But basically, as far as I'm concerned, it's a natural, completely natural way of producing a completely stable, natural cider, which is sparkling, has natural colour, and
Yes, so it's naturally carbonated, unpasteurized, unfiltered, and pure juice.
yeah. And basically, to do it, you basically need the apples. It tends to work better with bittersweet apples or cider apples. It doesn't tend to work very well with eating apples because apparently because of the pH, as far as I understand. But I think not necessarily. I mean, it could work with certain apples. It's not a science. You just got to try it. Just try it and see with your particular apples, because an apple that may work on one farm may not work on another one. So you really got to give it a go. Really. But basically, whatever apples you do use, they have to be right. It sounds silly, but just because they've fallen off the tree doesn't mean to say they're right.
Yes, exactly.
And so there's really two ways of doing it. My way is I let them fall on the ground, which is grass, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I just leave them on the ground to mature. And you know when they're mature, basically my method is just by the smell. If they're giving off a lovely aroma, and when you press the apple, it just gives slightly, then it's ripe, it's ready to press.
I've heard a third way, which is from Richard Reynolds, who makes Barbourne cider in Worcester. He says if the grass is dead under the apple, it's ripe.
Oh, really?
Which is a bit strange, but anyway, carry on.
Possibly, yeah. So then I pick the apples and I sort them straight away, put them in the trailer, and then as they go into press, they're sorted again. Once they've gone.
Sure.
And I do this at a temperature, preferably the temperature shouldn't be any more than 10 degrees C. And I put it into an open tank, and I add enzyme. The enzyme is organic. It's completely natural. It's present in the cider anyway. And the reason I add the enzyme is just to make sure that I have the Keeving works. It should happen naturally anyway, but I add the enzyme to make sure. So immediately after pressing, I add the enzyme, give it a stir, and then I leave it. And then the following day, I don't know whether could we go to the next, with a picture of a glass of cider?
Yeah, next, that's it, perfect.
Yeah, which one's that?
That's before it's.
Oh yeah, that off the press, it comes off a bit like that, a bit cloudy, a bit sort of dark coloured. And then this is the following day. Yeah, the following day, I add, I'm not sure what it is in English. In French, it's chloride of calcium.
Calcium chloride, yeah.
Calcium chloride. I just add a dollop to a glass.
Dollop.
And if you can see the sort of flocculations and sort of like a mass floating in the middle of that glass.
So that's the pectin, I think, is it?
Yeah. So if you see that appearing, then the enzyme's done its job, and you can add the calcium chloride.
So you take a sample of after about 24 hours. You've added the enzyme, which starts to work on the pectin.
Yeah.
And then as a test, 24 hours later, you're adding a little bit of calcium chloride. I add a few drops.
Yeah.
If you see sort of like a jelly forming, which is the pectin, And you've got quite a lot there. I would only add a few drops in. I would see a few drops at the bottom, like little balls at the bottom of the glass.
Yeah,
Then you know you're ready to add the rest of the calcium chloride.
that's right. And if it's not working, then I just wait till the next day and do the same thing again.
Exactly the same as me. Yeah. Well, I've been taught by you, so I would do exactly the same as you. Yes.
Yeah. So then we add the calcium chloride, which is I use about 1.2 litres to 1,000 litres. And the enzyme is about 100 millilitres, so they're a tiny amount.
Yes.
Anyway, then you just leave the juice and wait for the chapeau to form. If you have a... Sorry.
I was going to ask, does it rise to the top because fermentation starts and the carbon dioxide starts to lift it to the top?
Yes.
Yeah.
You just wait. You're waiting really for the fermentation to start, but slowly.
Yeah.
Which is why we say about the temperature, because if it's, say, 20 degrees C, it's going to start fermenting so quickly, it'll just stir it all up like a kettle boiling. And
yes, exactly. Yeah.
10 degrees or less, it should start fermenting slowly and lift this stuff basically you see floating in this glass. It should lift that up through the cider, which should
go back to
stuff to it.
Go back to slide 8, please, Albert, just to show the brown hat again.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, there we are. And so usually after about a week or so, you'll see this crust forming on top of the tank or barrel. And that's the chapeau. French called chapeau brun. Chapeau because it's a hat sitting on top of the side, and brun because it's brown.
Yes.
And basically, the traditional technique, which I suspect was because when they had originally it was in wooden barrels. After a week or so, they draw the cider off from the bottom of the tank and keep drawing off till they got sediment coming through, and then stop drawing off.
Right, of course.
But it's my particular method, which seems to work, is I actually scoop this crust off the top. So after a week ago, when I get a decent crust of about 1 centimetre or 2 thick, I get a sieve and I just scoop the crust off the top and then leave it. And then the following day, it'll form another crust. I scoop that off, and it keeps happening for about 3 or 4 days. And then you should have a completely clear cider. I don't know if there's a picture of a nice clear glass of cider.
Okay, so the final slide, please, slide 11.
Oh, there we are. Yeah, you should have a lovely clear cider like that. And I draw the cider off from the top of the tank until there's usually sediment at the bottom as well. So I keep drawing until I get the sediment at the bottom. And I'm drawing it off into another tank, which should be a closed fermentation tank. And then it should ferment slowly because the Keeving, apart from removing all the sediment and so on, it removes a lot of yeast and, more importantly, yeast nutrients.
Yes.
So this should mean that the cider ferments slowly then. And basically, I just then keep an eye on it every week. I take the gravity and make sure it's not dropping too quickly.
It is dropping too.
Off the sediment. And then,
Sure. Just been Fiona just told me that we're meant to finish at 2:45 for questions. I wasn't aware of that.
right.
If that's the case, Albert, can you put a little message up to advise us there? We'll happily go until 3, but if you want us to wrap up now, we'll wrap up now, Albert. That's entirely up to you. We'll carry on. So let's just go on to bottling. And what do you do to bottle? Do you there's a certain way, I presume you rack it off to try and stop it completely, more or less? Is that the case?
Yeah, what I do is, for instance, the people who've got medium cider, and it goes into the bottle at the gravity of 1025. Basically, to produce about the right amount of sparkling in the bottle, it needs to have a drop in gravity of about 5. So if I'm making medium cider, when the cider gets into a gravity of, say, 1028 or so, I'll rack it off. I add 50 parts per million of sulfide at that point. And then Then I'll keep an eye on the gravity again. And what I'm looking for is the gravity not to drop more than 1 degree or 2 degrees at the outside in 10 days at a reasonable temperature, 10 degrees or above. If it doesn't drop more than that in 10 days at a reasonable temperature, then it's safe to bottle it.
Yes, the Andrew Lee on his website is even safer. He recommends 1 degree or less over 21 days to be on the safe side. I follow you, and I do 1 degree or less over 10 days.
Yeah.
We just bottled over the last 3 days. We just bottled our Normandy style cider, and it dropped 1 point or less at between 11 and 13 degrees over 11 days. So I was perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
I bottled it, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so carry on. And what happens next?
Well, then basically, as I say, when gravity's not dropping too fast, then just before bottling, I had another 25 parts per million sulfite.
All right.
We bottle straight away. Then once it's in the bottle, generally speaking, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to have the secondary fermentation. And what French call the prise de mousse, which is quite nice, I think.
Yeah. So why do you add that 25 parts per million just before bottling?
Well, basically, I'm a great believer in sulfite. The guy who's running our French cider making course, he was also a great believer in sulfite. He said it's not for no reason that been using sulfite since the Romans, and I think it's good enough for the Romans. It's good enough for me. But basically, once it's in the bottle, I can't do anything about it. It's in the bottle. That's it. The only defense it's got against bacteria is the sulfite.
Right. So you're just trying to sort of stop or slow down the bacteria, allowing the natural yeast to continue their work and give the natural carbonation.
Yeah, and it's I'm not sure what it's called. There's a certain bacteria which can develop in the bottle, and sulfites are particularly good at preventing it.
Yeah, I think there's a lactic acid bacteria that can give you a
lactic acid. I can't remember what it's called now. And it's the thing is, if you do get this particular thing, you can't distill it either. It's no good for distilling.
Yeah, I think you might get ethyl acetate from this lactic acid bacteria.
That's right.
Yeah, I've had that once, and I throw away a whole load.
Yeah, that's why I use sulfite.
Right, that's what we do, isn't it? It took me about 2 days to empty all those bottles of gone-off cider. But it's important to not sell rubbish cider. I really believe in that. I think it's an absolute must. Well, let's just go through a few questions, Adam, then we can come back to one or two other things. We've got a few questions. Let me just see what they are, and I can ask them to you. So Christian, who I know does Keeving up in Aberdeen, asks, have you Keeved without PME? That's the enzyme, by the way.
Yeah. Not deliberately, but I have Keeving without
Yes.
because the cider for Calvados I don't tend to keep, and so I tend to just leave that to ferment on its own. And but it has keeved, so yes, I mean it will keeve without the enzyme.
I've never had that. I've had Perry Keeving, but never a cider. Andrew Williams asks, is the Calvados derived from the same 80-20 blend of bittersweets and sharps?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter so much for Calvados, but yes, it is.
I know there are Calvados-specific varieties of apple in Normandy, aren't there? Do you use any of those?
Well, they are mainly the ones we use anyway. So,
Pure purple.
yeah. They are the ones
These are traditional.
Calvados was the what's it called? City of Calvados. That's right. Herefordshire is called the City of Calvados. So they are they are good for Calvados.
Yeah.
Because I've got a theory that Bulmer's Norman and what's that awful green apple? Vilbury are both Calvados apples because I think they're absolutely dreadful for making cider, and I think they're just
Albert would disagree.
high sugar. Yes, Albert would disagree. I think they're just high sugar and pretty. Well, I don't like them anyway. So next question. Albert says, do you use the same pump for racking cider in Calvados, or does it different material, as in it? I guess the Calvados.
I use the same pump, but I don't tend to pump Calvados much. Calvados is mainly by siphoning, really. I don't tend to pump it. I filter it. I do filter Calvados because when you chill Calvados down, it tends to throw sediment.
Ah,
So I freeze the Calvados down to -10 or 12, and then filter it frozen.
wow.
To stop it throwing sediment.
Ah, clever. Okay, Emma Jordan says, how do you stop it from continuing to ferment without it becoming overly conditioned / gushing? I guess she means in the bottle.
Yeah, that's basically starting with the original Keeving. The chapeau should remove 40% of the yeast nutrient, and then by subsequent racking, every time you rack, you remove a lot of yeast. So
Yes.
the cider then produces more yeast, which uses up the nutrient. So by the time it goes into the bottle, it should be very very poor in nutrient. It should be only just enough nutrient left to produce the amount of sparkle we want.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's important to test it, isn't it? I mean, we sort of get the right sparkle, and then we'll leave it a month. Later, we'll test it again, and we haven't got a way of measuring the pressure in the bottle, but we don't want to see an increase in pressure over that month, and then we feel confident we can release it.
Yeah. Basically, the business of waiting for the 1 degree drop in 10 days, that's telling you that there's not enough nutrient left to over in the bottle.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Fiona's just changed the screen away from the question and answer. While she's getting, can we scroll down, please, Fiona? Christian asks, you mentioned belt press. How do you macerate your pulp prior to pressing?
What, these days, or
I think, yeah. I think
back in the UK. But,
yeah. So, do you macerate your pomace? Do you leave it for?
No, unfortunately, I don't. No, with the mobile press, the apples go from the trailer into a water bath, and then they're elevated up into the mill and straight onto the press. So no, there's no. The French call it cubage.
Yeah.
And we unfortunately we can't do cubage, but ultimately we'd like to buy a membrane press, and then we would do cubage, because I think it would certainly produces a better colour, a stronger colour.
I always worry that it encourages bacterial growth.
Yeah.
So
well, there is that, but I was told originally that with using natural yeast, there's one particular natural yeast apparently, which does its little bit in the cubage.
Oh, right.
And that's the only time it gets to do it, because it's killed by a very small amount of alcohol.
Ah.
And normally when it goes into the tank, the alcohol the level is too high for it almost immediately, so it never gets to do its thing. But apparently in the cuvage, it does its thing without being killed by the alcohol.
Brilliant.
And yeah, apparently it contributes to the aromas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, there's so much to cider, isn't there, you don't know about? It's incredible.
Yeah.
Any tips or any stories about Brexit, how Brexit has affected because you do sell a lot of cider in the UK. Has it made it easier or harder, and how have you got around the problems of Brexit since it's come in?
Well, it's just learning the ropes, really. I mean, originally when we started taking cider to the UK, we had to learn how to pay the duty and so on. And it's just really learning the new way of doing it. The old way doesn't exist anymore. So it's just finding the new way of doing it. We have to go through an agent now, but it's not a question of expense. It's really just getting the right papers, really.
The French the French customs over here have been fantastically helpful to us. We had a pallet, sent a pallet over for cider as wine actually a week ago. And the French customs, they rushed through our paperwork. They're all against us. They could have been more helpful, and the English customs have been very supportive over the years, haven't they? So
Okay, good.
very, very, a lot of help actually from both sides of the channel.
Yeah, we've been more affected by COVID, really.
Yeah.
That's changed quite considerably. Because you probably, well, you know, we used to do an awful lot of fairs and food festivals and so on in the UK. And last year, there weren't any. So
Yeah.
that changed our whole business thing, which in a way is a good thing. But it's something we should have done anyway. So we're doing more on the website now, more exports, and we've got the shop on the farm, which we didn't have before.
Yes, the same with us. We've got a little shop in our garage now. So it has, as you say, it's given us that stimulus to sort of do things we should have been doing years ago.
Yeah.
So swings and roundabouts. Just another quick question. I don't think there's anything else on the screen there. But what plans for the future? What are you going to do differently in the future, or just going to carry on doing the same wonderful cider, Perry and Calvados?
Well, Adam's just going to open a bottle of the late harvest for those who have the late harvest in the cider box. When it never overflows.
Dave's just going to go and open ours outside the front door, just in case.
Look.
Because I don't fancy wearing it. And ours has been out of the fridge a little while as well.
Yeah.
One thing we're going to do this year is a single variety cider. We have an apple called Saint Martin, and it's apparently very good for a single variety cider. So this year we should have quite a lot of Saint Martin, and we're going to try a single variety Saint Martin cider.
That's not very normal in France, is it? Or is it?
No, it isn't. But fortunately, things are changing in France. There's quite a lot of young people taking up cider making, and I think things are starting to move each other.
I shall hand back over.
Thank you, assistant.
I was in gush.
I didn't gush, no.
Neither did I.
Yours has to be in the post.
Cheers. Santé.
Oh.
Cheers.
Cheers, yes.
That's a bit paler, isn't it, than the medium?
Yeah, but just the only apples really here that we have a strong colour are Domaine. They have quite a strong colour. Most of the others are just...
That's delicious. I think maybe a few more questions coming in. I'm just going to grab my glasses so I can read them. How long we got left, first of all? We got 3 minutes, so...
yeah, but the late harvest is...
go on.
This is bottled at a gravity of 1035. So it should now be about gravity of 1030.
So it drops about 5 points in the bottle.
Yeah, and it's about 3% alcohol. So
yeah,
quite low in alcohol. And so this is the one we make. Well, it tends to be around Christmas, to be honest, Christmas, New Year time.
Yeah.
And because I found, although you can't really keep above 10 degrees C, it doesn't really matter how cold it gets. In the past I've had it. I've had ice forming on top of the tank, and it will literally sit there for 2 or 3 weeks. But once it warms up, it will keep. So low temperature doesn't seem to matter. It's just if it gets too warm, basically.
Yeah, sure. I think we're about 1 minute to 3. There's suddenly a whole lot of questions come in, but I think we haven't really got time for them. I think we need to think about wrapping up.
I
thank the committee.
Rattle through the questions as quickly as you can, Dave.
Go on then. Okay, so from the top, Andrew Root, what are you doing with the lees after keeving?
Well, I do use them for the Calvados. I ferment them separately.
Ah.
And, you can there is quite a bit of sediment you have to throw out, but you can recover some of the cider.
Okay. Oliver Dowdy asks, do you need a license to sell in your shop, in the garage or whatever? In the UK, you certainly do. You've got to go through licensing. You can contact me directly, Oliver, if you want some help in that. I can email you all the documents that we've used, which might be a help to you. Chris George asks, I think I read that a proportion of pears can be used in Normandy ciders. I may have dreamt this. Is that the case? And if so, do you blend pears into your cider at all?
I don't. No. We no, I don't. In the Donfon, the next department down, that's the pear department of Normandy, and they can use a certain amount of cider in their pear Calvados. But as far as I know, nobody around here uses pears in the cider.
But I think you can use up to 20% of cider apples in Perry.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not just for the brandy, but I think they can. In fact, the main researcher said they put a bit of apples in to make the Perry a bit.
Okay.
But we don't. We use 100%.
Yeah, I do as well. Benjamin Jaff asks, what SG would you bottle the dry Keeved cider?
Well, we bottle ours about 1,010 or 11.
Okay.
To 1,005. And we keep that little bit of sweetness there to give it more mouthfeel, and so it's less bone dry.
Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank, well, first of all, Fiona for keeping me on the straight and narrow with the technology, but particularly the committee for putting this together. It can't be easy putting together a virtual cider conference. And in particular, Albert, who's been an absolute star, giving up so much of his time and being so patient with all of us who struggle with the technology and struggle with everything, to be honest. But Albert's he's a busy man, but he's been so generous with his time and his patience. I'm really impressed, Albert. Thank you. And thank you to the Blands for coming on and sharing your stories and entertaining us and making such great cider. I've really enjoyed myself.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, it's been really, really nice, interesting conversation. In fact, I always learn a couple of things I didn't know. And Adam gives these talks, that.
Oh, see, secrets he's kept from you.
Well, probably he's not, he's sort of a man that keeps his own counsel a lot of the time.
I did communication studies and I learned how to communicate.
Right, I think we need to be off. So time to leave. So we're going to click on leave and let the rest of the sessions carry on. So cheerio. Thanks for listening, everybody, and nice to see you all. Nice to see the Blands. All the best.
Okay, bye. Au revoir.